Welcome to the Back to Health podcast, where we share inspirational stories of hope to help you reclaim your health. If you're suffering from a chronic condition and have been given little to no hope, if you've been told that there's nothing wrong with you, but you know there definitely is something wrong, or if you're just trying to be preventative and want to know how to reclaim your health, then this podcast is for you. I can't wait to share today's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Back to Health podcast. I hope everyone's keeping well and that you've been enjoying the series so far. So, today I'm back with another great jam packed episode, and our topic is bringing wellness into the workplace. Now, this last year, more than ever, there's been less of a clear divide between home and work life. And so, understanding wellness and how to incorporate that into our workplace as well as at home is super important. So my guest today is Courtney Johannesen, and she's a corporate wellness provider, mindset coach, and yoga teacher. She runs virtual, customized, multi-level corporate wellness programs designed to support mental and physical wellness. As a certified yoga and meditation teacher, she applies the principles and tools of yoga to support employees in cultivating well-being. She's also a mindset coach for women employees who are ready to step into their power and feel confident, calm, and centered without giving up their big goals. I'm excited to share this episode with you today. Hi, Courtney. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and talk with you.
It's great. And this is such a topical theme at the moment, just because given what everyone has been through in the very last year, work and home have really become quite blurred. You know, there really are not many distinct lines. And even as we go back to whatever the new normal looks like for different people, there is going to be increasing overlap between work life and home life. And then what wellness looks like when you're juggling such intertwined sort of relationships with, you know, your home relationships mixing with your work relationships and everything being in one space. So I'm really excited to like crack open this topic and learn more about what we can do to improve our wellness in what is now a new sort of workplace model, if you like. So maybe you could start with telling us how you got into this, like how this even became like a place of passion for you.
Absolutely. My interest and inspiration for workplace wellness comes from my own personal health journey. So, when I was working in a 9 to 5 type of job, I was having some personal health issues also, and really was struggling with finding the time, the resources, the information I needed to care for my own health when I was so busy with things at work and things at home. So I eventually was able to take some steps to make my health a priority. But I know that so many people struggle with this, even in a typical setting. When we are going into an office, there's still a lot to balance with work and home life. And a lot of times, taking care of ourselves gets pushed down to the bottom of the priority list. So, with my virtual wellness programs, I bring wellness into companies so that employees can take the time for their health during the day and the companies feel that they're giving their employees an investment by making this time and space in their workday. And it helps employees to be able to have that time for their well being. And in terms of their work productivity, they're able to get that mental refresh from taking a few moments away from work and taking care of themselves. So, I've been really passionate about this. And like you mentioned, in the last year or so, the way things have changed, it's become even more critical to take care of our health, but also more challenging at the same time.
Exactly. I think we find ourselves in this new conundrum where we were really struggling with how to do it, even when we were going into offices and coming home and having a bit of a clean break, but still time management was an issue. And I think maybe companies were just catching up and that I have seen increasingly that companies were catching up and wellness programs in place and go to the gym at lunchtime and meditation things, in the middle of the day. And there was lots happening. And then it almost felt like everything got flip reversed. And we're back thrown into the challenge of figuring it all out again. And how do you do that when you've got kids that you're homeschooling and work meetings that you're doing, and like you've got deadlines that you have to meet and all these projects going on, and there's just no time in the day to really feel like you can take out time for yourself. But on the flip side of that, I'd love to touch, because you talked about productivity and that myth of the more hours you work, the more productive you are, as or seen to be more productive. Um, can you talk about what changes you've seen in productivity based on implementing some of these wellness programs in companies?
Sure. Yeah, I think, like you said, when we're so busy, we feel like we can't take those few moments away. But we see that that little bit of mental white space where we're not actively sitting at the computer or, really focusing hard on that project can actually inspire more creativity. So, when people are working on solving problems and coming up with new perspectives and solutions to deal with what's going on in their work environment, that space away gives them that almost clarity to think about things in a different way. So, one of the ways I encourage just taking a few moments for personal wellness is, taking a break away from the computer screen. And maybe that means you looking out the window, taking a short walk, going to make yourself a cup of tea for a moment, and taking those little small, actually like micro breaks during the day has been proven scientifically. There's been some research studies around this that those little breaks can boost our productivity. We get a little bit of circulation in our body if we're moving around. That mental space again gives us that new perspective. Even if we're stepping out of the room, things can just come into our mind so much more easily when we're not actively trying and forcing the solution, the result that we're looking for. So that's just one way that productivity has helped. And another is that when we take those moments away to work on our wellness, my programs include some yoga stretching. And so the way yoga works, we can relieve pain and tension in our body that gets built up when we are sitting for a long time. So I know a lot of people are getting consumed by a lot of the Zoom fatigue and a lot of these demands of working virtually. And when we're spending so much time sitting at the computer, that stress starts to accumulate in our body. And maybe it's some neck pain, shoulder tension, some back discomfort. But when we can relieve that pain in our body with some gentle movement and relaxation and release, then we have again that mental space to think more clearly about the work that is in front of us and ahead.
And I think I can really relate to this, because you have this, if you take a few days off work, when if you allow yourself to, and you go away and suddenly you're recharging, you might be playing with your kids or whatever you're doing, and all these ideas just start popping into your head, and they've come out of nowhere, and you're like, oh, that's great, and that's great, and that's great. And I've really always noticed that with my team as well. Like when they've had a few days off, they're off, but they're actively then coming back with so many fresh ideas, and we can do this, and so much renewed energy that now we make it a point to force people to be like, it's been a while, you need to go have a bit of a recharge, like go take a day, go take an afternoon, go to the park, have a walk, do something for yourself, because you are going to be so much more valuable as a recharged, well rested human being than someone who is at the end of your tether, super stressed, who is running around on such low energy that you're just trying to survive the day, and you're having to push through it. The thing you
Exactly.
mentioned the thing you mentioned about Zoom fatigue, that it was huge. Like it was huge for us in our family, but it was huge around, like there were so many comments that I was reading, and like my kids were suffering from it, but not Zoom in general, but just being on devices and doing all their homework and stuff, because everything was like based on the device. And I eventually started printing like eco paper, but started printing stuff out, so my daughter was spending less time because she was getting headaches, and so she was actually doing stuff on paper, because it's just too many hours to be sitting in front of a device. What were the sorts of tips and things that you would give people who are spending so much time on Zoom or devices in general, about, apart from breaks, what else can we do to ensure that we don't suffer from that sort of end of the day, I just can't take any more of Zoom?
Yeah, I think it's really important to find a few activities that you enjoy that don't use a screen. And, at the end of the day, we do want to have that time to step away from work and to unwind so that we can get a little bit of reset before the next day. But sometimes that means that we automatically turn to our phone or turn on the TV. And it's really important to have those activities that are going to help refuel you. And so, for a lot of us, that might not be doing those things that we're used to, using the phone and TV, but we want to find some more restful activities. And again, trying to find that little bit of creative spark is really nice. So, maybe it's doing a little bit of artwork. Maybe it's cooking if that's something that you enjoy. Um, I know a lot of people have really benefited from mindfulness and meditation practices during this time, especially to combat some of the Zoom fatigue. And I'm finding that even just being able to, excuse me, close your eyes for a few moments feels like such a relief where your eyes get to rest, your brain feels like it gets to rest. And so those meditation and mindfulness practices have been really helpful to help people have that sense of being a little bit more recharged. And I think a lot of times we might feel like meditation and mindfulness are this complicated thing, very difficult to achieve and find that space of stillness. But there are different ways to integrate mindfulness and meditation into our day that is not complicated and can give you that feeling of being rejuvenated. So I'm finding that one to be the most effective, the mindfulness and meditation, but also just making your rest time more restful. Trying to spend time away from screens, out in nature is a great way to recharge and rejuvenate. And of course, being away from the computer.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of those are really great tips. And that sort of brings me to sleep, really, because sometimes, especially if you've been working at home and you may have to work in the same room that you sleep in, or you may have to work like in the same room that you normally have your meal. And so that space becomes a little bit like there's too many things happening in one space, and so it's really hard sometimes to sort of partition those parts of your life. So especially if you have to work in your bedroom, which many people were forced to, because you're suddenly working from home, you need to find a space that's as quiet a space you can shut the door. um, that means that your sleep space, the place where you go to rest, where you go to rejuvenate, where you go to have that replenishing and replenish your energy, it's sort of overtaken by now becoming a workspace. And I think I did hear a lot of people struggle with then getting good quality sleep, because it almost felt like there was no division, or there's things running through your mind that you're sort of thinking, I've got to wake up and get that, and I literally get up from my bed, go straight onto the laptop. There's almost like there's no division in those spaces. So were there any tips that you implemented specifically around that particular issue?
Yeah, definitely, especially with the idea of starting work first thing in the morning. I've been really encouraging my clients to give yourself a little bit of a morning routine so that you're not waking right up and going over to the computer, but taking a little bit of time to do something that you enjoy. And it's really important for your at home new type of morning routine to be one that is really nourishing for you. So if for example, don't like running, but you're trying to force yourself to run and exercise first thing in the morning, you might be dreading it and you don't even want to get out of bed and get your day started. So that might not be a great activity for you. But if you feel like you need that slower start to the day, maybe something like reading is a better way to nourish yourself and fill your cup, so to speak, so that you have that energy available for yourself to give to your work and take care of the people around you. When we're talking about working in the bedroom or the same very close space where we sleep, it is definitely a challenge. And one thing that can help improve the quality of sleep is to make sure that those devices are completely turned off when you go to sleep, because the blue light from these devices actually creates some simulation stimulation in our brain. It's a stimulating source of light that awakens our brain. And so, even if those devices are on in the same room, our brain will be a little bit more awake, even on a subtle level. And we're not getting as deep of a quality of sleep as we could be otherwise. So, for people who are working in the same space as their sleep, it's really extra important to set up good sleep habits so that you are getting that really deep sleep for yourself. And when you're not working and not sleeping, trying to spend as much time away from that space as possible. So you might take your living room and use that as your place to recharge, or, make sure that you're going out for a walk every day so that you get that change in your environment and scenery, so that when you do have to go back into work, you again have a little bit more clarity for yourself.
I think that is really important. And I think in the beginning, when you're thrust into something like a lockdown, you don't really have time to think through all your disciplines and all your routines and how am I going to set these new rules for myself. And you sort of, until it gets to a point of "There's something's not working. I'm feeling tired. I'm not feeling rested. I'm getting headaches or whatever it might be that shows up in your body as being the stress response to not being able to split and, take time for yourself. It almost gets to the point where it's too late, or you've got to really work on it then because you're so depleted.
Yes.
Are there ways that you can catch that earlier? Do you have tips on how we can spot these patterns so that we can avoid getting to the point of being totally burnt out?
Absolutely. That's such a great point, too, because when everything first shifted in the very beginning, we were all in this sort of survival mode. And we had to shift very quickly in so many parts of our life, our work, our home, how we spent our time outside of work and home, and our health habits, exercise, everything became different. And now that we've settled into a bit of a pattern here, we are maybe finding those signs that things aren't quite working, or things that we feel like could be better, or we're just feeling kind of off in a certain way and aren't really sure what to do. I've been hearing a lot about that. And I think that's where wellness practices can really be helpful. I think it's important to pay attention to your signs of stress and how that's manifesting in your own personal life, because that's going to be different for everyone. So, we can often feel stress in our body. Maybe we have more of that rapid heartbeat when we're stressed, or we get some shallow breathing. Maybe we get sweaty palms. Sometimes that happens. And when those signs of stress happen, it's literally a sign from your body that it's reacting and bringing you into a higher stress mode, which has its benefits. It can help us be ready and alert to deal with certain problems and challenges. But the downside is that we want to make sure we are what we kind of refer to as completing the stress cycle. So when that stressor is finished and complete, we want to give our body those signs and signals that we are okay again. We are safe and that stress is finished. And that is so important, because without that, the chronic stress continues. Our body continues to release this cortisol and the other stress hormones that keep us on that higher alert phase. And so that's where unresolved chronic stress can turn into burnout, an even more serious problem where we're physically, mentally, emotionally exhausted, feeling like we just don't have the capacity to deal with anything anymore. And, that can affect our mental health, our physical health, and really have an impact on not just individuals, but their family life, their work life, and even company culture, because I know these days so many people are reaching that burnout phase that it's affecting the way their company is running and the company environment. So I think paying really close attention to those signs is really critical, and creating some healthy boundaries for yourself. So if you notice certain situations are causing you that stress, trying to find a pattern there. Is there stress around talking to a certain person or maybe dealing with a certain issue? And how can you find some healthy ways to resolve that? It could be getting some support, asking for help. It could be giving yourself some deadlines, like I'm not going to work after 6 p.m. or whatever the time is for you. Maybe getting really firm about your social interactions, if that's a source of stress for you, and creating those personal boundaries for yourself so that you can really preserve yourself and your well being, and thinking about those boundaries as a form of self care. It really is, because we get to take care of ourselves without letting ourselves be any more affected by stress in a detrimental way.
Yeah, and I think the point you mentioned about we need to let our bodies know when we've been through a period of stress. We need to let our bodies know that it's now okay, that it's safe, that we've come out of the particular stressful period. And I feel like maybe people are still actually in that fight or flight because we're still not completely out of lockdown. There's still a lot of uncertainty. Things are always shifting. There's always talks of could there be another lockdown? There's all these sort of like the fear mongering and all the bits of news that you hear always add to your uncertainty. And when you're in a state of uncertainty, of course, you're in a state of panic and you're in a state of fight or flight. So, for over a year, most people have been living with their parasympathetic nervous system like quite acutely like suppressed because they're continuously waking up in this sort of sympathetic state of I'm doing this, I got to get through this, I got to get through this, I got to do this, and I'm not allowed to have all the things that I normally have that allow me to enjoy myself, that allow me to spend time with people I love, that allow me to just even enjoy the weather outside sometimes, because sometimes you can't go out. So all of those things just compound almost to really accelerate the chronic stress symptoms that people can experience. And given that it's been a year, which is already a really long time, I think one big takeaway from this episode is that if you have been in that state for a long time, use now as a point to reset. Use now as a point to find something that will make your body feel safe. Like stuff is starting to open up slowly. So if it is like going out and having a meal in the park with a friend that you haven't seen in ages, or if it is like going to your favorite restaurant or going to a bookshop and actually just browsing some books for a change, rather than ordering, because that's one of the things I used to love to do, just go into a bookshop and just see all the different books and just pick them up. But now you browse online again using a device, and then they you have to choose one or two, and they either get them to your Kindle or they come through the post, but it's not the same experience, and it doesn't feel the same. So I would really urge anyone listening to just take this time to reset and actually help your body feel safe again. It's really important your body does feel that. What are some of the challenges that you've seen in being able to help incorporate wellness in the workplace when everyone's been remote? So they're not in the same space, and it's not like you can just go with your mate to go and do a workout at lunchtime or go and do a meditation. You've got to adapt to do it remotely. So have there been any challenges around that?
Absolutely. And if I can, I'd like to just step back too and offer a
Sorry, of
couple
course.
strategies about how we can come back into that
Oh,
safer
yes, please.
feeling to reduce that stress. One of my favorite ways to do this is to use some breathing practices. Breathing practices can reduce our fight or flight response and bring us into more of that rest and digest mode, helping to complete that stress cycle. And when we've had this type of chronic stress for any amount of time, there's a bit of a learned response. Our body starts to perceive a lot of threats as stressful. So, with our breathing, we can start to calm our stress. And there's, various types of breathing techniques, but the simplest is to just work on breathing deeply so that you can send your breath all the way down to your belly, feeling your belly expand and lightly press out with the inhale, and then lightly contract inward with the exhale. And with this deep breathing, we want to try and keep the chest fairly still so that we're breathing down into our belly. And that is really effective for creating that relaxation response. So it's something that people could do anytime, anywhere, which is great about breathing. If you find yourself out, maybe starting to do some activities that you used to love and are now a little less familiar. If that stress and anxiety kicks in, you can use your deep breathing to help reassure your body and mind that you are okay and you are safe. And that brings me to another one I love too, which is using that positive self talk, maybe affirmations, to tell yourself that you are okay. And, there's various ways to do this as well. One would be using some I am statements. I am safe. I am okay. I am supported. Giving yourself what you feel like you need in that moment. And you can use a word, you can create your own statement to help you feel reassured and a little bit more calm. But that helps to create a mindset for ourselves where we are trying to step away from maybe negative thoughts, things that are really worrisome or anxiety provoking, and create a little bit more centeredness and calm for ourselves, creating that own internal shift.
That's such good advice. And yeah, I mean, that is really important. It is important to have these tools in your toolbox and to look for ones that really feel good to you, I would say,
Hmm.
because not everyone enjoys all the same things. And so it's important to find the ones that feel good for you.
Sure.
Um, so, looking at the challenges then of trying to incorporate wellness sort of remotely, where everyone's in their own different spaces, they may not have access if you do need resources to those same resources that you may have if you've got a gym or you've got equipment that people might use. So, how does that look, and how is that different when it's remote?
Yeah, that's a great question because it is different, and a lot of people might not be used to exercising at home. One thing that I integrate into my programs is using what you have at home. So we don't use a lot of fancy equipment. Sometimes even a yoga mat is optional, but just trying to find a comfortable space in your house. And you might need to get a little creative sometimes if you need some space or if you need equipment. Um, for some people, doing exercise and wellness practices at home has actually been a bit more comfortable because we are taking away that element of possibly worrying about what other people might think or how other people are viewing us while we're exercising. So that has been a nice benefit. But there are some challenges. Sometimes companies are a little bit reluctant to start something new and take on a new initiative when there's already so much going on. And maybe people have a lot in their workloads where it feels like I can't take on this other new project as well right now. I can only speak to my programs, but I make them as easy as possible. So I do all of the back end work for companies and just provide them with the key links that they need to send out to employees to join in on the virtual classes. So I think, when with that type, I try to make it very accessible and easy to implement so that there's not this extra challenge and hurdle to making wellness accessible to their employees.
That sounds good. And I think maybe what that is one of the things that sometimes we overcomplicate what wellness and self-care has to look like. And I think people can sometimes get really overwhelmed, like, oh, I've got to find time, and then I've got to incorporate into my routine, and then I've got to stick to it, and I've got to remember to do it, and it becomes very stressful. Almost, it's almost like the opposite of what you're trying to achieve by having the wellness practice in the first place. So are there any tips in how you can start incorporating wellness practices without getting too overwhelmed?
Yeah, definitely. I think, like you said, if we don't have maybe an hour for self care, we think we just can't do it. And I like
Yeah.
to really try to break it down because any amount of self care is going to be helpful. So whether it's 5 minutes or an hour or more, anything that you can do for yourself is going to help your overall well being. And when we think about self care, I like to think about using an approach that is simple, short, and sweet. So, simple meaning that it can be things easily accessible. Maybe self care for you is drinking a glass of water. Maybe it's eating another vegetable with your dinner or going outside for 5 minutes just to breathe that fresh air, maybe taking a short walk. So these things don't have to be complicated. And, short, like I said, it could be as simple as 5 minutes. It could even be 1 minute of deep breathing, and that's self care. But also keeping it sweet, finding something that you enjoy. So, not forcing yourself to do something just because you think it's good for you. Because if you do create that element of force
Yeah.
around it, it's going to be harder to do, and you're probably not going to enjoy it quite as much. So, we want that self care time to be enjoyable, happy, and maybe even feel like a little bit of relief from the rest of the day and the stressors of work and life. So keeping it easy, really breaking it down and
Almost like
finding something simple, short, and sweet.
I like that. I think that's easy to sort of have in your mind and easy to follow. And it's almost like finding something that you feel is escapism, I guess, like your own little piece of paradise where you can just go off either in your mind or actually physically go somewhere to just escape from whatever it is that you deal with, because we do have to give ourselves that respite, especially when we're finding ourselves in a situation where we are not the ones in control, or we're not fully in control of the situation. Like, we don't control that narrative, and so decisions are being made for us, there's uncertainty being thrown into the mix. And it's really important that we give ourselves like a space, either in our minds, if you're using, like, hypnotherapy type techniques or just mindfulness and meditation, or physically make a space in your house where you don't use it for anything else apart from going there to reset yourself and recharge yourself and rebalance. um Thank you, Courtney. I think there's been some really great nuggets in the conversation today. Are there any last words of wisdom you'd like to sort of leave the audience with, or any action you'd urge them to take on the back of this episode?
Well, I think self care is something that, like we said, it feels like we are taking time away from our other things. And I just would encourage people to try and shift that mindset. So, by taking care of ourselves, we're better able to take care of others, to do our work, to ultimately live better. We have better relationships, we're better in all areas of our life. And so, if we think about self care a little bit differently, it's not just doing something for ourselves, but it's doing something for others. And we could even take that out further, helping our community, helping our world to improve. And so I think if we kind of widen our perspective on self care, it changes how we think about it and feel about it, and maybe helps us to prioritize it a little bit more.
I love that so much. Thank you. So you can find all the links to catch more of Courtney and check out her work and what she does in the show notes. And if you would like to hear any more episodes of the Back to Health podcast, you'll find the links in the show notes as well. Thank you so much again for your time, and we hope to see you back on another episode very soon. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you would like any of the links or the show notes, you can follow them in the description below. And for more episodes of the Back to Health podcast, please be sure to follow us on YouTube, or you can follow us on Spreaker, where we host our podcast. Thanks again, and I look forward to joining you for another episode of the Back to Health podcast. Until then, stay healthy, stay happy, and stay informed.